The sound of the slap stopped the entire coffee shop. For several seconds, nobody moved, nobody spoke. The only thing anyone could hear was the faint hiss of the espresso machine and the soft crying of a little girl hiding against her father's chest. Jack Reynolds stood completely still, one arm wrapped securely around his 6-year-old daughter, Sophie, while a red mark slowly appeared across his cheek. The woman who had struck him was Victoria Stanton, a billionaire CEO who was accustomed to people immediately obeying her. What she did not know was that the quiet father standing in front of her had spent 15 years surviving places where people with far greater power had learned to fear his name. Sophie tightened her tiny fingers around Jack's faded flannel shirt. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice shaking. Jack gently rubbed her back and lowered his head toward her. "I have you, Bug. You are safe." His voice was calm enough to settle her breathing, but when he finally looked back at Victoria, something in his expression made the confidence disappear from her face for the briefest moment. He did not threaten her. He did not raise his voice. He simply asked if she was finished. Victoria did not understand it then, but that question was the beginning of the end for her. Earlier that morning, everything had seemed ordinary. Jack had taken Sophie to the Gilded Rooster, a busy coffee shop in downtown Austin, because she had earned a small celebration after going an entire week without having a nightmare. Jack had promised her hot chocolate and the biggest blueberry muffin in the display case. It was the kind of promise that might sound insignificant to another parent, but to Jack, small promises mattered. His daughter had already experienced more loss than any child should, and he had built his entire life around giving her reasons to smile. Jack looked like an ordinary working-class father. His flannel shirt was faded, his jeans were worn, and his boots had clearly survived years of hard use. His face carried the marks of time, including a pale scar along his jaw. Most customers probably assumed he was simply another tired single father trying to make ends meet. They could not see the training behind his relaxed posture or understand why he always chose a table with a clear view of the entrance and emergency exit. Jack had learned those habits during a previous life that he rarely discussed. For years, he had served in elite military operations, entering places where names were classified and mistakes could cost lives. He had led men through hostile territory, rescued hostages, survived ambushes, and carried wounded soldiers through conditions that would have broken ordinary people. Yet none of those experiences had prepared him for watching his wife, Sarah, slowly lose her battle with leukemia. Sarah had died when Sophie was only 3. During the final days of her illness, she had asked Jack for one promise. She wanted Sophie to grow up knowing how deeply she was loved. Jack had promised her. After Sarah died, he left military service, packed away the medals and memories he could not bear to explain to his daughter, and moved to Texas. His new battlefield became completely different. School pickups, grocery shopping, bedtime stories, scraped knees, nightmares, birthday parties, and making sure Sophie always knew that someone would come when she called. That morning, Sophie was happily destroying her blueberry muffin while Jack watched her with a rare smile. She asked if they could visit the park after breakfast. Jack told her she could go if she finished eating without covering her entire jacket in crumbs. Sophie looked down at the mess she had already created and laughed. Jack shook his head, pretending to be disappointed. For a few minutes, the world felt peaceful. Then Victoria Stanton entered the coffee shop. Victoria was the founder and CEO of Helios Technologies, a massive aerospace and defense company worth billions. She wore an expensive white suit, dark sunglasses, and heels that announced her arrival before she even reached the counter. Two assistants followed her closely, carrying tablets and documents, while her personal security officer, Bradley Ford, watched the room from behind her. Victoria was known for getting what she wanted. Employees feared disappointing her. Business partners learned not to challenge her. She had spent years building a reputation around one simple belief. Money gave her the right to control every room she entered. She was already furious that morning because an important defense contract had been delayed. While speaking angrily on her phone, she moved through the crowded cafe without paying attention to anyone around her. When another customer politely reminded her that there was a line, she humiliated him in front of everyone and continued walking. Jack noticed the behavior but ignored it. He had no interest in getting involved. His attention remained on Sophie. Then Sophie stood up. She picked up her hot chocolate with both hands and carefully started walking toward the trash can. Jack watched her automatically. He noticed Victoria approaching from the opposite direction while still staring at her phone. His instincts immediately warned him that their paths were about to cross. Sophie, stop. Jack spoke firmly, but the warning came a second too late. Victoria turned the corner and walked directly into Sophie. The cup flew from Sophie's hands. Ceramic shattered across the floor. Hot chocolate splashed onto Victoria's expensive shoes, and Sophie fell backward onto the hard floor. For a moment, the little girl simply stared at the broken pieces around her. Then her eyes filled with tears. Victoria looked down at her shoes before she even looked at the child. "You little brat," she snapped. Sophie immediately whispered that she was sorry. Victoria demanded to know where her parents were and accused her of behaving like an animal. She was furious about her ruined shoes and seemed completely unaware that a frightened 6-year-old was sitting on the floor in front of her. When Victoria reached toward Sophie, Jack was already there. Nobody saw him cross the room. 1 second he had been sitting at the booth. The next, he was standing between Victoria and his daughter. "Step back," Jack said quietly. Victoria stared at him. His clothes were inexpensive. His boots were worn. His watch was old. She made her judgment within seconds. She believed he was nobody. Jack lifted Sophie into his arms. She immediately buried her face against his shoulder. He held her carefully and whispered that everything was okay. Then he looked at Victoria. "You walked into my daughter because you were looking at your phone. Lower your voice, apologize to her, and leave." Victoria actually laughed. She could not believe a man dressed like Jack was giving her instructions. She reminded him that the shoes alone cost thousands of dollars and told him that someone like him had no right to lecture her. Jack glanced at the shoes and then at his daughter. Shoes can be replaced. What children remember cannot. The room became uncomfortable. People had stopped pretending not to listen. Several customers were watching Victoria. One young man quietly lifted his phone and began recording. Victoria noticed. Her pride turned into anger. She told Jack who she was, explained the size of her company, and threatened to involve the authorities. When Jack refused to back down, she stepped closer and warned him that she could make sure his daughter was taken away. That was the moment everything changed. Jack had tolerated insults against himself before. He had been threatened by men far more dangerous than Victoria Stanton. But Sophie was different. Sophie was the promise he had made to Sarah. "Do not speak about my daughter that way," he said. Victoria demanded to know what he planned to do about it. Jack simply told her to leave. Instead, Victoria raised her hand and struck him across the face. The slap echoed through the coffee shop. Jack did not react. Sophie cried softly against his chest. Jack kept one hand protectively around her back while Victoria stood there breathing heavily, expecting him to explode. He did not. His expression remained completely controlled. "Are you finished?" he asked. That was when Bradley Ford came rushing through the crowd. He was Victoria's security officer, a large former military man who had handled dangerous situations before. His hand moved toward his jacket as he ordered Jack to put the child down and step away. Jack remained still. Bradley took another step. Then he saw the scar on Jack's jaw. His eyes dropped toward the faint tattoo near Jack's forearm. His face suddenly lost all color. Bradley remembered Afghanistan. He remembered a mission where his team had been trapped, wounded, exhausted, and nearly out of ammunition. They had believed they were going to die. Then a small special operations team appeared from the darkness. One man had led them. A scar along his jaw, a grim reaper tattoo, eyes that never seemed to panic. Command Sergeant Major Jack Reynolds. Bradley slowly lowered his hand. "Sergeant Major," he whispered. Jack looked at him. Bradley immediately raised both hands. "I am sorry, sir. I did not recognize you." Victoria stared at her bodyguard in disbelief. Bradley turned toward her. "You need to apologize to him." Victoria demanded to know why he was defending Jack. Bradley looked back at the man holding the frightened little girl. "Because he is the reason some of us are still alive." The coffee shop became completely silent. Victoria had no idea that the man she had just slapped was the same soldier whose name was still spoken with respect inside elite military circles. She had thought she was humiliating a powerless father. Instead, she had just challenged a man whose reputation had survived long after he had walked away from the battlefield. And Victoria was about to discover that the slap itself was not the most dangerous mistake she had made that morning.